Do you want to maximize your success with NCUA? Join Mark Treichel as he shares with you the insider's view on passing your exam with flying colors. The With Flying Colors podcast is sponsored by Credit Union Exam Solutions by Mark Treichel. If you would like to work directly with the Credit Union Exam Solutions team and receive support to optimize your results with NCUA so you save time and money, visit us at marktreichel.com to find out more.
Hey, this is Mark Treichel, and this is another episode of With Flying Colors. Thanks for joining me here today. This is another short take of an episode from April 2022, which was called Fair Lending 101, where I interviewed NCUA's former director of the Program of Fair Lending at NCUA, Joe Goldberg. This is a short take, and we specifically discussed the topic, what is fair lending? Now, Joe is available as a member of my team if you find out that you are going to have a fair lending exam by NCUA because they are increasing their staff in that area and increasing their contacts. Or if you would like some assistance in the event that you might have one of those exams, reach out and we'll get you in touch with Joe so he can assist you in that regard. But with that, I'm going to jump into about a 5-minute segment on what is fair lending with Joe Goldberg.
So NCUA has a lot of examiners that do exams, and then there's a structure about fair lending exams and things like that. And that was housed in your office. But before we kind of get into that, let's just start with, when someone says fair lending, what does that mean?
There's no formal definition of fair lending, but in essence, it's a system that requires decisions on applications for credit to be based solely on credit-related factors, not on factors that are unrelated to creditworthiness and are discriminatory. So fair lending is usually looked at by what is prohibited rather than what is required. There's an example on HUD's website, HUD's Department of Housing and Urban Development, which oversees the Fair Housing Act. Here's what it says on its website for consumers. What is fair lending? Fair lending prohibits lenders from considering your race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, or disability when applying for residential mortgage loans. Fair lending guarantees the same lending opportunities to everyone. We'll see also that in addition to that fair lending is designed to enhance the availability of credit. As I mentioned, I had been an adjunct law professor, and when I would teach different laws and regulations, I'd always like to see why were the laws created, what's the purpose of the laws. And fair lending is one of those subjects where that's generally contained right in the laws themselves. There's language in them that says why Congress passed the law. For example, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, which is probably the main fair lending law, says this right in the statute itself. The Congress finds that there is a need to ensure that the various financial institutions and other firms engaged in the extensions of credit exercise their responsibility to make credit available with fairness, impartiality, and without discrimination on the basis of sex or marital status. Now, as an aside, the original ECOA only covered those two prohibited bases, sex or marital status. But then Congress went on to say a little bit more. It says economic stabilization would be enhanced and competition among various financial institutions and other firms engaged in the extension of credit would be strengthened by an absence of discrimination on the basis of sex or marital status, as well as by informed use of credit, which Congress has heretofore sought to promote. In the Fair Housing Act, there is language that says this: it is the policy of the United States to provide within constitutional limitations for fair housing throughout the United States. And then in HMDA, the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, this is a statement of findings. The Congress finds that some depository institutions have sometimes contributed to the decline of certain geographic areas by their failure, pursuant to their chartering responsibilities, to provide adequate home financing to qualified applicants on reasonable terms and conditions. That's kind of a direct reference to redlining, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And then it talks about the purpose of the chapter, which is HMDA, provide data and other information to those who are interested in making sure that housing financing is extended on a discriminatory basis. Just one quote I like, it's from President Lyndon Johnson when he proposed the Fair Housing Act. It was part of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, which was, I think, the second one. The first one was in 1964. But he said this: "I am proposing fair housing legislation again this year because it is decent and right. Injustice must be opposed, however difficult or unpopular the issue." So that's sort of the long answer to your question of what is fair lending.
There's a lot of meat there. Let's unpack it a little bit. In a second, I'm going to ask you why this is important. But before I get to that, that quote is great. I love quotes. And the finding of Congress, when you highlighted that on redlining, as you're reading through and discussing all of these things, I'm thinking, okay, that is why NCUA has the office that you worked for. That is why NCUA goes out and does a certain number of fair lending examinations. I want to say somewhere between 25 and 30. We can get into a little bit of that and how those things work. But before we dive into what this means for credit unions specifically and how it works with NCUA, explain a little bit why these laws are so important.
There's two reasons. One is what I just described, which is that the right thing to do is to prevent injustice. But it's also because for those of your listeners who are responsible for consumer compliance and involved in lending, consumer lending especially, you need to know what the law is because it can affect the viability of the credit union.
All right, this is Mark Treichel again. So that's 5 minutes from Joe Goldberg on what is fair lending. Again, if you find out you're having an exam or want to have some assistance on the front end of an exam, reach out and we will get you in connection with Joe. The full episode, again, was published in April of 2022. It's one of my more popular episodes. And with that, I want to thank you again for joining me today with Flying Colors. I'm publishing this the Tuesday before Thanksgiving and would like to wish you and yours a happy Thanksgiving. And if you're traveling, be safe. That's it. Mark Treichel signing off for With Flying Colors.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of With Flying Colors. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app to hear future episodes where subject matter experts of all varieties will provide tips on how to achieve success with NCUA. If you would like to learn more about how we assist credit unions, check out our services at marktreichel.com.